So in this section, we're going to talk about proportions and ratios and percents and see how they can be applied in technical problems. So first, let's look at a roof slope. So when we talk about the pitch of a roof, roofers or contractors would say that roof has a pitch of 712 or 512 or 612. Those are common roof pitches. And all that means is that the slope of this roof, which is a word that we're familiar with from algebra, the slope is 7/12. All right? So that means we got a rise of 7 and a run of 12. 7 what and 12 what? Well, that just means if we go up 7 inches, then we go over 12 inches. Okay? If we go up 7 feet, then we're going to go over 12 feet. Okay? So 7/12, the units don't matter. It's a ratio. All right? As long as they be the same ratio there. So the first thing we need to do here, well, let's read the question. And then we got to, so we want to calculate the height of the roof based on the slope and the width. Okay, so slope is given to us, and the width is here. Okay, and we want to go, we're going to go halfway across the roof here, and then we'll go up to the peak. We want to know how high that peak is, all right? So first thing we got to do is we got to figure out what half of this width is. So let's take 143 and 5/8. Now we're working with the fractions, okay? So we're going to cut that in half. We're going to divide it by 2 or multiply it by half. Well, it's probably easiest in this case to go ahead and make this into a decimal. So let's do that. So we can start by taking 5/8. 5 divided by 8, and that is 0.625. All right, one fraction that you'll probably start getting familiar with if you're not already. Okay, so 0.625. So we want to divide that by 2. So let's take 153.625. So 143 and 5/8, 143.625, and we'll divide that by 2. Okay, divided by 2. There we go. 71.8125. 71.8125. Okay. So this gives us 71.8125. And keep all those decimal places for now while we're working with it. In the end, we'll change it back to a fraction. We want to keep it exact as much as possible, unless we get like a super long decimal. All right, so now we want to make a proportion. So this ratio here, 7:12, that's the rise and the run. And we've got a height here, we'll call it h, or you could call it x if you wanted. So we have the ratio of h to 71.8125 is equal to 7/12. All right, so let's make a proportion out of that. Those have to be proportional. 8125 equals 7/12. All right? And we know how to solve proportions. We need to cross multiply. Okay, so you can cross multiply, or actually, since the h is on top, if you want to think of it as just multiplying both sides by 71.8125, that works. In algebra, we learned that if we're dividing by something, we could just multiply by it. Okay, 71.8125. And this method works nice because the oh goodness gracious, the h is on the top here. All right, so we got h equals 7/12 times 8125. So let's take that answer there that's already in there. We'll have to retype it. And let's go that times 7/12. 7 divided by 12. So you can just, times 7 divided by 12. It's nice on Desmos Scientific here because it just writes it as a fraction. And we get this number, 41.890625. Now I'm going to leave that in my calculator. I'm going to go write down, just to kind of keep record, 41.89, okay? So this is about 41.89. Okay. Now I rounded that off, but I'm going to work with the whole decimal here, okay? So we now need to change that into sixteenths, okay, or the nearest 16th. So we've got, oops, I didn't want that. Let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, so I want to take that. It actually did it twice. Did you catch that? So I'm going to take that 41.890625, and I want to get rid of the 41. That's 41 whole inches. That leaves us with our decimal. And then we want to take that decimal, and we want to change that to sixteenths. Okay, so we want to know how many sixteenths that is. So to change that to sixteenths, we're going to multiply by sixteenths. And that tells us we have 14.25 sixteenths of an inch. Okay, again, we want to round this off. Just want to cut that off, but round it. So we're cutting off a 2. So we round down to 14, all right? So it's 14 sixteenths. So this is 41 and 14 sixteenths. Technically, it is approximately, because we rounded that off. All right, so good concept to understand there. That squiggly means approximate. Okay, and then the last thing we could do is we would like to go ahead and simplify that fraction. 41 and 7/8 inches. Okay. Okay, so 41 and 7/8, that's the idea. 41 and 7/8 inches. Great. Well, let's look at a problem dealing with some percents, okay? Ratios can be written as percents or fractions. So a percent here now, we want to scale something up, okay? So we want to make something larger by 22%, okay? So the question here is to scale the dimensions of this part up by 22%. Now, some important reminders here. Remember that 22%, 22% is 22 out of 100. Percent means out of 100. So we can write it as a fraction, or if we want to write this as a decimal, we can move the decimal. There's an invisible decimal right there after the 22, and so we can write this as 0.22. Okay, so that's important to remember. Now, when we want to scale this up, okay, so to scale this up, we want to make it larger by 22%. So we have two methods, okay? So part one here, all right, we got two methods. Method one is to find out what 22% is, and then add that onto the total, okay? So method one here is to find 22% of the radius, okay? So we want to take each dimension. We're going to do these separate, okay? So we'll start with this is the radius of the circle, okay? That technical dimension there, that's the radius of this circle here, okay? So that's how it shows up in technical drawings, all right? So 2.26. So what we need to do here is we need to find 22% of 2.26. When we find a percent of a number, that means multiply. Whenever you see of, that means multiply. Okay, we find percents by multiplying. Okay, so we can say, let's find 22%, so 0.22 times 2.26. Okay. So we can come over here, our calculator we got. and we can multiply 0.22 by 2.26, and we get 0.4972. Okay, so 0.4972. So that is 22% of 2.26 centimeters there. And then we wanted to scale it up, so then we add. So here we found 22%. Let's say find. That's our first step. Okay, and then add to the original. This is the two-step process. Okay, so, well, the original was 2.26, and now we're going to add 0.4972. So if we go add that, we're scaling it up, so we found out what 22% was. And so if we take that and we add it to the 2.26, then we get 2.7572. Okay, 2.7572. Okay, and that is centimeters. Okay, now it doesn't tell us what to round to here. Let's go ahead and usually if we start with 2 decimal places, we can round to 2 decimal places. To 2 decimal places. Okay, so we'll round that to 2.75. So that's method 1, or actually 7/6, sorry, because we're cutting it off here. Okay, so that was 1 radius. Okay, now we can do that in 1 step. So let's get method 2 here. So if something went up 22%, well, it was originally 100%. If we find 100% of this, 100% of 2.26 is 2.26. So if we want it to go up 22%, we can say we want to find 100 plus 22%, which is 122%. Okay? So let's find 122% of that. Well, what is 122% as a decimal? That's 1.22. And when we find 122% of 2.26, we're going to multiply 1.22 times 2.26, the length there. Okay? So let's see how that works here. So we're going to go back to our calculator, and we got 1.22. Okay, and let's multiply that by 2.26. And that gives us our answer. Same answer. Okay, so notice though here we did it in 1 step versus 2. So you can either find 22%, then add it to the original, or just multiply by 1.22, 122%. Okay, and so same answer, 2.76 centimeters. Okay, so 2 methods there. Okay, the 2-step method, find 22% and then add the original, or the 1-step method, just find 122% of that. Okay, and so we can do the other ones here. Let's go ahead and try that for 14.32, which is this distance. Okay, and then 4.98. So 14.32. If we have 14.32 and we want to bump that up, just multiply that by 1.22. And we get 14.747. Sorry, I can't read. 17.47. Okay, so we might call that our width. So we had 1 radius. This is our width. Okay, Maybe we'll call this radius 2 for the other one. And this is 4.98, so let's try 4.98. And that gives us 6.08. So that's our other radius there. Okay. So anyways, this method too is going to be a little quicker. So now, last part, and then we'll wrap this up, okay? So our last part, we're going to calculate the dimensions here when we scale it down. So scaling it down means we want to take this part and we want to make a small version of it, okay? Same shape, but a smaller version of it, okay? So to go down now, again, we have two methods, okay? So method 1 and method 2. So let's go question 2 here. Method 1. So method 1, we could find 22%, and then we'll subtract that, okay? So find 22% and then subtract. Well, 22%, we already know of that radius. We did it over here. 22% times 2.26. Okay, so we have 0.22 times 2.26, and that gives us 0.4972. And then we want to subtract, okay, because we want it to be smaller. So subtract from original. Okay, so let's subtract that. Find the 22% and subtract it. So we go here. Okay, and so we had this number here, 0.4972. Okay, let's subtract that from the original. Okay. So we got 2.26. I just retyped in here to clear that junk out. And we subtract 0.4927, and we get 1.7628. 1.7628. So 2.26 minus 0.4972 is 1.7628, or 1.76 centimeters. Okay. Now that was method 1. Okay, where we found 22% and then we subtracted from the original. Method 2 here is this. Method 2 is if we take 100% minus 22. So let's find not just 22%, but let's find 100%, which the whole thing is 100%, minus 22%, that is 78%. Okay, so we're going to find 78% of what we started with, the 22.6. So let's take 78%, 0.78, times 2.26. Okay, so 78%, so it's going to shrink. It's like it has a discount, okay? And so if we go to our calculator, find 78% of 2.26, we can get that in one step. And so we get 1.76 there, okay? 1.76 centimeters. Same answer, one step. Okay, so you got the two-step method and the one-step method, okay? So either find 22% and then subtract that amount, or just figure out the percent you'll be left with and do that, 78, okay? And we get the other ones real quickly. You can go try that. 78% of these two, you'll get 11.17 for the width. Again, taking 0.78 times 14.32. And if you do 0.78 times 4.98, you'll get, let's see, 3.88 centimeters. Okay, so choose the method that works best, either find the percent and subtract, or just find 78% there. All right. Great job. We'll stop there.